country clearly understood this. They didn't give us the income tax. It took them all the way up to the 16th Amendment, all the way up to 1913, before they assumed that they owned your income. You know, whether you pay 5, 10, 15, 20, or whatever the percent is, or at the beginning it was like 1 or 2% on a few people, it's the principle. If they can institutionalize the principle that they can tell you how much you can keep, that means they own everything and you get to keep a certain percentage under their permission. So that was a great concession. That was a seriously flawed concession, and that is what we're living with. It undermines the principle that it's your life. And it should be your money. The same way with an inheritance tax. Inheritance tax, after you build something and you pay for it after taxes, you want to pass it on to another generation, then you have to deal with the government. The government said, well, you can pass half of it, you can pass this much, and then the government has to take a certain percentage. That is indeed a principle that shows that the government owns it. Another basic principle, fortunately it is not in place now, but it's still on the books, and that is the military draft. Assuming that we can draft up 18-year-olds going to fight these wars, and when I was drafted, it was in the 60s, drafted to go fight in a war that wasn't a constitutional war. So that means the government owns our lives as well. So this principle of self-ownership is the basis of a free society. So we need to challenge those individuals who believe that our rights come from the government, our rights, our property is something the government can regulate. Now we can't use our property unless we get permission from the government. And then they have all these regulations restricting us. At the same time, we have to pay all that rent on it, which is called taxes. We have to pay huge amounts of taxes. And we don't end up really owning our land. It's quite a bit different than what was intended in the free society. You know, when the founders put it all together, they claimed we had a republic and gave us a republic. And it's quite different than a pure democracy. A democracy means that if you can get 51% of the coalition together, they can undermine the minority, the 49%. They can do whatever they want to that 49%. A republic is there to protect everybody equally, and especially minorities, and not have a dictatorship of the majority. Now, they were very concerned about this and warned against pure democracy. John Adams said that if you do become a democracy, what it will waste, and it will finally commit suicide. It will murder itself. And in many ways, just look at what we're doing to ourselves. What are we doing to our civil liberties? I know it's Washington, it's the Congress and other people, but it's us, because we're supposed to be the government. We're allowing this, the undermining of our liberty. If you take a bill like the Patriot Act, I mean, just think, that does us more harm than all our enemies can do to us. We've done it to ourselves, so we don't need laws like the Patriot Act. We need to protect our privacy, not to sacrifice our Fourth Amendment rights. Since the Patriot Act, I understood the emotionalism immediately after the Patriot Act was passed, right after 9/11. But the bill that it passed had been around for years and years. So individuals wanted that law passed, and they saw 9/11 as the opportunity. So we are threatened more by our own government and our own neglect than we have to worry about anybody invading this country. We're not going to be invaded. Nobody's going to land tanks, you know, out on the beaches and invade us. The other day, somebody had a video on the internet, and they had been stopped at a railroad. Anybody happen to see this? And they had a train going, and he failed to count them. But I watched the video, and I think it was like 17 minutes or something, and there were 3 tanks on every car. And of course, he was befuddled. Why do we need so many tanks? And I thought that was a good question. Why do we need so many tanks? Who's going to invade us with tanks? When are we going to have a tank warfare? So building thousands and thousands of tanks means that we're looking to use tanks someplace. You know, who knows where? What country are we going to invade? So for defense, we don't need more and more tanks. We need just enough to defend ourselves. And right now, that is one thing we have done very well. I've been in the military, I know a little bit about the military. We are capable of defending ourselves. Nobody will attack us, but I think what we have is we have too much militarism. We have adequate defense, which is very important, but we have way too much militarism. We're doing the things that we shouldn't be doing. We're overseas, we're getting involved in nation building and policing the world, and getting involved in internal affairs of other nations. We're involved way too much in this international government. I actually don't believe there's any advantage to this United States to be part of the United Nations, the IMF, and the World Bank. About the monetary system, the financial system. But those who are in charge and who would like to stay in charge, they have concerns too, because they know it is not long lasting. They actually have plans, but they're coming out of the IMF and the World Bank. They want to devise the next fiat currency, because those who print the money have a lot of power to do it. So if we live up to our traditions, live up to our law, live up to our Constitution, we will have a sovereign state. And we would make sure that we dictate the rules of the money. We follow the Constitution, which means that only gold and silver can be legal tender. All countries that destroy currencies, all countries that have fiat money or paper money eventually destroy their currencies. And under those circumstances, in order to restore confidence, they always have to back their money or make their money convertible into something. So gold is very, very important. And on the books, we're supposed to have 262 million ounces of gold. We aren't even positive about that. I can't even get an audit of the gold. I'd like to get an audit of the Fed, but we truly need an audit of the gold to find out whether the gold is there, or whether they've sold the gold, or loaned the gold, or had deals made with gold and had these exchange agreements. So it would be necessary. So not only do I demand and expect to see an audit of the Federal Reserve, but we ought to know whether we, the people, even have the gold in the bank.
Amen.
We have neglected our Constitution in many areas. I mentioned the fact that we go to war without a declaration. I mentioned the fact that we have a monetary system where we just disobey, the rules about money and foreign policy. But really, on the issue of regulations, when was it exactly when our country gave up the notion that laws were supposed to be written by the legislative branch? Remember what it says in the Constitution, all laws will be written by the legislative branch, not by the executive branch. So who writes the laws today? Courts get hold of some difficult situations and discussions of the law. Do they just rule whether it's constitutional or not? No. They make a ruling, then they write laws. The courts aren't supposed to write laws. What about the executive branch? Technically, the executive branch shouldn't even be allowed to write regulations. I mean, Congress writes a law, they pass it, and then all of a sudden the executive branch goes and writes thousands and thousands of pages of regulations, which becomes the law of the land. I would like to be known someday as the president that actually shrunk the size of the Federal Register. Circumstances of fighting these continuous wars and the concern, and just like the atmosphere after 9/11, too many are too easily too anxious to give up our liberties. We were born that if you give up your freedoms for safety, you'll neither be safe nor will you be free. And I'm afraid that that's where we are quickly going in that direction. But the Patriot Act undermined the Fourth Amendment. But what about this National Defense Authorization? And I am, very impressed over a lot of people, just as you respond, you know about this. And this is very fortunate, at least you know about it. A lot of this stuff had gone on in the past. Our CIA has been involved in overthrowing dictators and who knows what, getting involved in the drug war and secret financing of governments and all these things. but they at least knew it was illegal because that's why they tried to keep it secret. But now they've taken a dangerous step in the direction of codifying it and putting it out in the open. And if we don't say something about it, the burden is really going to fall on us, the people. Because a year ago, the president announced that because there were some very bad people out there that would like to do us harm, and even some American citizens, that it was too cumbersome arresting people and trying them and putting them in prison. So he announced that we can, and the official policy of the United States is that the president can decide if he likes, he can assassinate American citizens. I mean, where in the world does that come from? It's not like there has been a failure. There's been over 370 individuals who have been arrested as suspects, terrorist type suspects. And they were taken in and they were tried, and 262 are serving in prison. But no, they're assuming that it is necessary for the president to have the power to assassinate an American citizen. He's done it 3 times now. 3 times already. And one was a 16-year-old son of Alaki who associated with some bad guys. He had never committed an act. They never charged him. They never tried him. And they said, well, they didn't know his son was so young. They just thought he was an accomplice, so they assassinated him as well. But this National Defense Authorization Act is going one step further. And this we ought to pay a lot of attention to because literally they have repealed the law and the principle of posse comitatus, where the military is not used to enforce civil law. But the new law says now that the president, under the president's direction, can use the military to arrest any American citizen, to overcome all civilian law. But not only can the military arrest a civilian American, he can be denied a trial. He can be arrested, held indefinitely, without charges, without a trial, and he can be hauled off to a secret prison. Now, if we allow that to stand, I mean, that is a giant leap. And I'm not expecting that next week you're going to hear about your neighbor being hauled off. But it's been done before. It's been done in other culture. And if we have a financial crisis, if the financial system breaks down, it usually leads to civil chaos. So you just wonder what's going on about why they're putting these kind of laws in place. This is why we have to work very, very hard in restoring the principles of liberty, restoring the principles of a republic, limiting the size of government. Others who run for president, they talk about, I know how to run the economy, and I know how to tell people how they're supposed to live, and I know how to police the world. I would like to be seen as a president. I don't want to run the world. I don't know how to run the world. I don't think we should be running the world.
That's right.
A president and a government is supposed to provide the environment, a sound currency and free markets, limited regulations, and let the people go to work. They're the ones who run the economy and spend their own money. But what about in the personal area, on lifestyles and how people should run their lives and spend their money? That should be a personal decision. Personal decisions should be something that the government is not involved in. Yet now we're assuming that the government, is going to participate in making people better people. They can't do it. We can't make other countries better country by force. We make our problems worse, and we don't accomplish anything. There's too many unintended consequences, too many things that come back to haunt us, too many problems that we get from doing this. Same way with individuals. We try to tell individuals what their habits should be, what their drinking and smoking and gambling habits should be. They're very important. I think that in the area of the drug issue, I'm a physician. I think drugs are so dangerous. I think all the things that are called illegal drugs are bad, and people should be so very cautious. But we have a greater problem, say, with addiction of drugs, with prescription drugs, than we do with illegal. And make sure that nobody ever made a mistake, didn't drink too much alcohol, and didn't use drugs. Hey, boy, that would be awfully tempting. But it doesn't even work. I mean, the prohibition of alcohol was such a total disaster. Finally, the American people woke up one day and said, this prohibition is just not doing it, and they repealed it. They woke up. Someday I think the American people ought to wake up, realize how futile this war on drugs is. It hasn't done anything to reduce the use of drugs. All it did was enhance criminality, and also it gave too much license for our government to use that as an excuse to intrude on our privacy.